Hi, I'm Wendy Jensen. I'm starting a series of conversations with veterans. We're starting with World War II, and conveniently, we're starting with my dad as the interviewee. I'm going to be asking him some questions, and hopefully it'll lead to some interesting stories about World War II. Yesterday was Veterans Day, and I was at one of the elementary schools, and I was quite moved to see how respectful all the children were. It was really a good experience, and I know you were there with some of your friends, just kind of standing for 2 minutes in silence. So let's start at the beginning of your service time. You were drafted at 18.
Yeah, that's right.
And this was 2 years after Pearl Harbor was bombed. So what year would that have been?
43.
That was 43. Okay. And at the same time, some other of your friends and some other guys in town were also drafted at the same time?
Yeah, there was, I suppose, almost 20 of us who were drafted at the same time. Some went in the Navy, one went in the Marines, and the rest of us all ended up out at Fort Sheridan. And from Fort Sheridan, there was 13 of us sent to Camp Roberts in California. And then we were broken down into different, according to our interviews and that, and our aptitude tests. I got a chance to go to mechanic school. And there were some who were truck drivers, some who were cooks and bakers, and some were buglers, and the rest of them mostly took infantry training. I only had 3 weeks of infantry training, and then we started school, 10 weeks of school. They had a class entered every week and a class graduated every week. So it really went fast. We worked on motors and different things. It was called second echelon. When I graduated from the school, there was at least a half a dozen of us who were sent to the 38th Division in Camp Livingston, Louisiana. When I got into a company, I told them I was a mechanic, and they said, "We don't need any mechanics, we need riflemen." So I ended up in a rifle squad. In about 2 or 3 weeks, my squad leader came to me and asked me if I'd like to be a first scout.
And what was that?
Well, on patrols, first scout is out ahead of everybody, but he gets $4 more a month. So
what a deal.
That sounded like a good deal to me, because I think I was only getting about $11 a month pay, and we were sending money home for bonds and different things, savings, and so $4 more was quite a bit.
But it meant that you were the one to go out in front of everyone else.
Right. And then we trained on Camp Livingston, went on 25-mile hikes to get in shape, and then on New Year's Eve of the year 1943, they took us to New Orleans to board a ship. And
do you remember the name of the ship?
yeah, Monterey. It was a Matson liner that sailed out of California. It used to run between California and Hawaii. And she was a big ship, and I think there was about 4,500 men on her. And they dressed us in our winter clothes, woolen shirts, woolen pants.
Jackets and everything?
Everything. And
about how warm was it at that time?
Well, this was at night, so it was okay, but next day when we were going down the Mississippi River, started to warm up. And we had to wear those winter clothes for 3 days. The whole idea was to fool anybody who might be watching, to make them think we were going to either Italy or Germany or someplace where it was cold. Instead of that, we went down toward Panama, and it kept getting warmer and warmer and warmer, and after 3 days, they told us we could dress in our khakis. So everybody threw their clothes overboard. That was some stinking stuff, I'll tell you. And when we got to Panama, we went through the canal, and I don't know if you know it or not, but in salt water, you can't get suds with the soap. So we got right in the middle of the canal. There's a lake there, freshwater lake. So somebody said they're taking on fresh water. So we were in staterooms. There was 6 bunks in each stateroom, and we had a bathtub. So I ran down and filled it with water. Of course, it was ice cold, but at least you could get suds anyhow. And so that was the only bath I had for 18 days.
Wow.
But then the guys found out if you had shampoo, you could take a bath with shampoo. That would suds up.
Oh.
So we cleaned their, what do you ever want to call it, commissary, whoever it was, out of shampoo. And we would draw a cup of water out of a lister bag that they had hanging on decks, and take a shower, take a bath in a cup of water. All the guys who got shampoo, we didn't all get shampoo. So, and they only fed us twice a day, morning and at night, but they had cases of Washington apples, so we ate apples all day long. And when we got to the other end of the canal, the Monterey was such a fast ship. We left the convoy. We were in convoy from New Orleans down to Panama, and then the Monterey took off by itself because the convoy was holding her up. And we were about 1 day out in the Pacific Ocean, and they had the loudspeakers on their radio. And Tokyo Rose said, "The 38th Division's on their way to Hawaii for jungle training. Welcome to the Pacific." So there must have been some spies around there someplace.
There must.
So we got to Hawaii. We took jungle training and amphibious training. And we were also on guarding the island. And when the 7th Fleet was in, we had to stay out on the beach 24 hours a day in case of an attack. My job on Hawaii was, I had a 36-inch searchlight that I had to start up every day, charge the batteries, and wipe it down with oil so it wouldn't rust, because it was right near the ocean. But I could turn it on in the daytime, but I never got to turn it on at night. That was only in case of a attack.
Right.
So,
And what was your plan if you turned it on at night? To turn it on and dive? Get out of there fast, or what?
it was pointed right down at the ocean. You know, you
Uh-huh.
couldn't point it up at airplanes or anything. And
Okay.
you just sweep it back and forth. And,
So you'd have to turn this light on and then stay by the light?
yeah.
And meanwhile, the enemy would be trying to shoot the lights out?
Yeah. Well, that was the idea.
Okay.
And one night, some guys down on the beach, the searchlight was up on the hill, in the mountain, and they saw some boats coming in, and they called back. But in fact, you had to report every 15 minutes. And they said, there's people landing out here. And they said, well, they told them, don't do anything until we try to find out what's going on. So these guys called back and said, getting closer and closer. We're gonna open up on them pretty soon. And then they found out it was the 77th Division practicing beach landings.
Wow.
Could have killed a whole bunch if they hadn't gotten stopped in time. So then after we'd been there about 6 months, then we got on another ship and went to New Guinea. That was really hot then, crossing the equator. And we slept up on deck. And you had to stay by your spot, or somebody else would take it, you know, because
Oh,
everybody couldn't be up on deck.
right.
So it was two of us, we'd go and eat one at a time, and the other guy would stay on that spot, on the top of the hatch cover.
Oh, okay.
And one night I was on guard, and I had to walk up to the bow of the ship and then back again. And we got into a typhoon, and everybody went below deck because the waves were coming over the front of the boat. So I was still out there all alone. That was kind of scary. But I never got seasick. 'Cause, I think they said it was because I was deaf on one ear that it didn't bother me as much. But there was guys throwing up all over the place. It was just terrible.
Yeah.
And we got to New Guinea and came in at night, and there was lights all over. And the guys were asking, what are those lights? And everybody was telling them, well, that's a big town over there. And when it got daylight, there was nothing there. Well, jungle came right down to the water. And we went back to our camp. We relieved, I think it was the 1st Cavalry. And then we took some more training there. And we must have been there about 8 months. And then we, beside our training, we helped unload ships. And I had a friend who was a baker. His name was Jimmy McBride. And he asked me if I wanted to help him in the kitchen. I said, sure. He says, you won't have to go and unload ships, and you just help me, and we'll bake stuff, and when the guys come back, they work 24 hours a day unloading the ships. And we'll give them donuts and cookies and coffee, you know, before they go to bed. So I thought that was a pretty good job too. And every time we were gonna bake something, I had to go get the vanilla from the 1st sergeant because the cooks would drink it. We had to keep it locked up. So that went on for 2-3 weeks, and then it kind of petered out, so I had to go on the load ships again.
Oh, you lost your bakery assistant
Yeah,
job.
lost my gravy job.
Oh,
But and they put us on another ship and took us to Leyte. And we were in a convoy then. And when we got in, a ship in the first group had been sunk. They were unloading the ship, and the hatch covers were off, and a Japanese airplane went right down the hatch.
kamikaze?
Yeah, suicide.
Wow.
And all you could see was the top of the mast sticking out. But they didn't lose a man. They lost all their equipment, so they had to take them over to another island and re-equip the whole battalion. And first night we were on Leyte, it hadn't started raining yet. It was pretty decent, so we dug our holes and got in them. And they had guards on at night. There was a guy named Warren Sodergren, and he was on guard. And all of a sudden he starts shooting. And first lieutenant was hollering, "Who's shooting? Who's shooting? Stop it!" And Sodergren says, "I am." Well, the officer said to him, "What are you shooting at?" He says, "I don't know, but it'll be there in the morning." He was quite sure he hit it. He shot a caribou, a water buffalo.
A water buffalo?
So in the morning, about 20 Filipinos showed up and butchered it right on the spot. And they went away with a big hunk of meat on a stick over their shoulders, because there was no refrigeration. If you had to eat it right away, you know, cook it or do something with it. So that was an experience. And then we were in advanced detail, and we finally went to our camp. It was up in the hills, and then the rest of the company joined us. But it was so muddy, it was raining by then, that the trucks couldn't get through. They would haul stuff as far as till they got stuck, and then they would unload it right in the ditches. We stayed there for took more training, tried to get back in shape again. And then in January, we made our landing on Luzon. That was at San Narciso. And then in 2 days, we walked 33 miles to Subic, which was a naval port. And when we got there was only 7 Japanese there, so they pulled back into the hills. And guarding Subic, or guarding Zigzag Pass, which went over the mountains. And it took us 13 days to get through this pass. And the reason we had to do it was so that was a main road to Manila. And we had to get that opened up so the trucks could go through and bring in equipment so they could attack Manila. And this was the entrance to Bataan. And we finally got it opened up. Then we had to stay there and put men on bridge guards so the Japanese wouldn't blow up the bridges. So there was 3 guys on each bridge. I think it was about 7 or 8 bridges. So in the meantime, the transportation corporal and a Jeep driver were going back. The company was set up, the kitchens were set up back a ways. And they were going down through the pass, and a Japanese soldier threw a grenade under the Jeep, and the Jeep driver and the corporal both got wounded. And the sergeant, first sergeant came up to me and asked me if I would drive, because they knew I had a Army driver's license. And so I thought that was a good deal.
Even after
Again.
what happened to the previous driver?
Oh, yeah, because they went back and stayed at the kitchen that night.
Oh,
And then they came up in the morning with pulling a trailer full of ammunition and food. Well, that worked for 1 day, and then they said, bring the Jeep up and dig in with the company. So we came, brought the Jeep up and stayed night and day right with the company. And what the corporal and I did, we dug a big hole in the ground and drove a Jeep over it. And we crawled under the Jeep at night. And I remember the first night was on a hill, and we were down in the hole under the Jeep, and the Jeep was going, And the corporal said, did you put the brake on? I said, oh yeah, I always do that. And all night long, that Jeep was groaning like that, but it didn't move. And so that's how we stayed under that Jeep for about a week, I guess.
okay. And where were the Japanese at this point? Were they
All around us,
all around you?
yeah. We, when we first started up in Zigzag Pass, the first day, we were down in the foothills. And there was a house there and a well, and I had just drawn some water out of the well. You threw a pail down, and if it landed right, it would fill with water, and you'd pull it up again. And I took my steel helmet off, and I put water in, I was washing in my helmet, and all of a sudden, a machine gun opened up on us. The guy came running and stepped in my helmet and it fell down. I grabbed it and put it back on my head. And we were pinned down there for quite a while. And the bullets were going through this Filipino house. It's terrible. So they finally found out where the machine gun was and stopped it. Then we started up through Zigzag Pass. And like I say, it took 13 days to get through there.
13 days. And you had a friend who wrote a poem about it.
Yeah.
Would you like to read it, or should I read it?
Well, yeah, go ahead. Kind of hard to read.
It's written on stationery that says the United States Army, and it's held together with a whole bunch of tape.
I had it in my pocket all the time.
You kept it in your pocket? Did you copy this yourself from his copy?
Yeah.
Okay. From the beach at San Narcisco,
Narcicero.
I think maybe you should read this. To the shores of Subic Bay, we were cautious of the story that the Japs had run away. As we moved toward inland cities, ever alert both night and day, we watched for hidden snipers left behind to cause delay. On the Subic and
Langapo, yeah.
Alangapo, their small numbers didn't last, but the fight began to toughen once we entered Zigzag Pass. That the pass would not be taken, some had said, and so thought the Japs. But when we began advancing, for each one, the notes were taps. Up to the mountain, lowly, surely, losing men but gaining ground, every doughboy making certain that no Japs were left around. Day by day we kept advancing, saw their fortress crumble fast, and in 14 days of fighting, we had taken all the pass. Westward, southward, still we fought them, till we rid them from the land, and that is how we won the title, the Avengers of Bataan. There's a little stamp below this that says Avengers of Bataan.
Yeah. That title was given to us by the War Department at that time. We officially are the Avengers of Bataan now.
Bataan, I said that wrong. So without you going through Zigzag Pass, they couldn't have opened the road to
Manila.
Manila,
Yeah.
which was vital.
Yeah. See, they brought the stuff into Subic then, Subic Bay, and then unloaded it and came up this highway through the pass. And one night a truck rolled over right in our driveway with these big, huge shells in it. And it laid there for about 2 days before they came with a wrecker and tipped it up again.
Wow.
They had some huge guns that they were blasting the wall around Manila. And
When was, so Manila, at that point, Manila had to be taken back from the Japanese?
mhm.
Okay. Can you tell me anything about these 14 days that you spent going through that, or would that be too hard?
Well, we dug in a different spot every night as we kept going forward, and sometimes we'd have to stay the same place for a couple days. And one night the Japanese started running up and down the road dragging log chains, because there was a sawmill right there too, just to harass the guys and keep them awake, you know.
Oh, wow.
And finally one night a guy was waiting for him. He rolled a grenade down the hill. And there was no more
No more noise?
log chain dragging after that. But they did everything to keep us on edge.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Then after we got everything secure, then they took us to some different places on Luzon. And, see, that was in January, and we didn't get everything cleaned up till, I think it was October.
By cleaned up, what do you mean?
That it was safe to be any place on the island without getting shot.
Oh, so to secure Luzon Island, it took that long. I was wondering about the weapons. I know that recently you were that you fired a World War II rifle, was it?
M1, yeah.
For a memorial service. Can you tell me about the weapons that you carried with you? The gun?
Well, in basic training, we had 1903 Enfields. And
Made in 1903? They were, what?
that was the model.
Oh,
yeah,
the model.
Yeah.
That didn't mean they were made in 1903? That's what,
Originally, they were, yeah.
Oh, okay.
They probably were,
So they
some of
were
the
old.
guns looked like it.
so they were leftover guns from
Yeah,
World War I.
and then we got the M1s toward the end of our basic training. And when I got my outfit, they gave me an M1. And when I was first scout, then I carried a Thompson submachine gun,
Oh,
which
okay.
was very handy. It had 10-round clips, 20-round clips.
So where did you carry these extra clips? Did you
Pack.
put them in a pack?
You know, if you had to walk a long ways, that pack kept getting heavier.
I
Some
bet.
guys even threw their toothbrushes away.
To lighten the load?
Too heavy. Oh, we made our landing. I was on a bazooka squad, and I had to carry 6 rounds of bazooka ammunition.
Which looked like what? Bazooka?
Yeah, they weighed over 2 pounds, almost 3 pounds apiece.
Okay.
So that was probably about 17 pounds extra, and the M1 is pretty heavy. And they had that steel helmet on, and when there's a landing, when the first wave goes in, they run up as far as they can with a landing craft. And when they back off, their propellers dig holes, you know, in the underwater.
Right.
So when I came in with all this ammunition in my pockets and my rifle, I stepped in one of those holes.
Oh, no.
It went down, and somebody grabbed me and dragged me out, or I probably would have drowned it. But,
When you made this landing, were you being shot at by the
no,
Japanese?
no,
No. They didn't know about it?
no,
Okay.
unopposed landing. MacArthur was really good at that, finding places to land where there was no opposition.
You saved a lot of lives then.
Yeah. Then I got a hold of a carbine, which was a smaller rifle, lighter. But they, the supply sergeant saw me with it after about a week and took it away from me, because I wasn't supposed to carry one. Yeah, if a guy got wounded and had a pistol, somebody would grab the pistol right away. Even the medics were picking them up,
Really?
yeah. Well, they were shooting the medics too, you know.
Sure.
they took us different places on the island, and it was a lot. I went to the hospital for 18 days. I had hepatitis and malaria. And when I got out, I got on a truck and went to what they call a repo depot, and then you wait there for a ride back to your outfit. And I remember these guys that worked there, one night they were all dressed up and they had these new boots on. And I asked him, what are those? And he said, they told me they're combat boots. It's a quartermaster crew. They're all wearing combat boots, and we'd never seen them.
What were you wearing?
I can't remember. The shoes, yeah.
Shoes?
Army shoes. Yeah.
Oh.
But the boots came up higher and were pretty nice. But the leather was turned inside out, but the rough side was out. So they'd scraped all that fuzz off and polished them, so they looked pretty nice. And took a while for us to get them. They had to ship enough of them so everybody else got them, and then finally the infantry got them too.
Oh.
But
So they were kind of slow in provisioning you for what you needed.
yeah. And then when I left I finally got a ride back to the company, and I got up to where company headquarters was, and I asked the first sergeant where my platoon was, and he says, way up there on the top of that hill. He says, you better not try and get up there, you know, weak. Yep. All they give us in the hospital was intravenous feedings, and because of the hepatitis, couldn't have anything greasy, so just some weak soup, and so you didn't get built up very much while you were in the, actually it wasn't a hospital, it was a clearing station.
Okay.
I suppose that's what they call a MASH unit after, in the Korean War.
Right.
They just did the preliminary work on you, and if you're too bad, they shipped you to a hospital.
Right.
Otherwise, you went back to your company. So I stayed with the headquarters because we were due to get relieved anyhow. And the first night, they put a kid from Seattle in the hole with me. There was 3 of us in the hole. And he woke me up for my turn at guard, and he handed me a grenade. And he says, hang on that handle tight. He said, I pulled a pin on it because I heard something down the hill, and then I dropped a pin. I sat there about an hour with that, holding onto the handle on that grenade, and I don't know what time it was, probably about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, well, this is stupid. So I threw it down the hill. Every hole, all the way around the perimeter, threw a grenade. Well, in the morning, the officer was walking, our company commander was walking around. Who threw that first grenade? Nobody knew. And I didn't volunteer, so. But, you know, that was some of the funny things that happened.
Right.
There was things that were good too.
There were some good memories.
Yeah. And then when we're so high up on this hill, and we saw the convoy coming to relieve us, and they were only about a half a mile away, and they stopped. Must have got shot at or something. I never did find out why they stopped. We just sat there and watched them sitting there. They must have dug in. And we had to wait and wait and wait till the next day before they finally got up to us so we could go home. And while we were in that spot, there was an outpost about halfway up to where my platoon was. And they only manned it in the daytime. And then they would go back up to the platoon, and at night the Japs would come and get in there and drop knee mortar shells down on us below.
Oh, wow.
knee mortar shells don't have fins on them. So when they shoot them, if they don't land on the point, they don't go off. And we were sitting in our holes, it was raining that night, and then we could hear these knee mortar shells landing right next to us, going splat. And some of them would roll in the hole. We'd pick them up and throw them out again. But a lot of them went off too. And then before morning, the Japs would get out of the outpost.
And then you'd,
And our guys would come down and man it all day.
why did they leave it at night if they knew the enemy was going to take it over?
I guess they just didn't want to sit there.
Okay.
I don't know, I didn't ask. Thought they might send me up there.
What about the people back home? Was there much communication, or were you pretty cut off from?
Well, the mail would come in bunches. I remember one time I got 15 hubs at once.
Oh.
So what we did, we lined our hole with them, we slept on them. And get letters, and then we had this airmail paper that was so thin, you know, and we'd write when we could, and they'd pick up our mail and take it down. And I helped load a mailboat once in New Guinea, and boy, how some of that stuff ever got home the way we dropped it down in the hole of this inner island ship. Guys that were sending coconuts and everything home, you know. And,
That would be a surprise for someone sitting in Wisconsin.
yeah, and we'd get packages. Cookies were all broken.
Sure.
Best thing I got in New Guinea was a can of sardines.
Oh.
Yeah. Girl from Stoughton sent that to me. Then my aunt sent me a package, a birthday present, and I got it in about June.
Oh, and your birthday's in March.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell me what the relationships were like between you and the other men that you were living with, fighting with?
We got along
Did people pretty
really
much?
good, yeah. When I joined the company down in Louisiana, there was, see, they varied in age so much. Some of the older ones were in their 30s, and then there was us 18, 19-year-old kids.
Right.
And there was an old guy, and we lived in huts, 6-man huts. And there was an old guy in my hut his name was Gilbert Woodruff, but his nickname was Goathead. He wasn't a very good-looking guy. He said to me, Gjertson, he says, you aren't gonna make it through this war without some help. So he says, I think I'm gonna adopt you.
Aw.
And so they called me Little Goat. That was my nickname while I was in the Army.
Aw.
And he didn't get home. Yeah, he got killed.
Remember you saying one time it was just like a day or two before he was supposed to leave for home, too.
Yeah, he had 4 kids. And they had a score they went by. You know, you got 1 point for every month you were in the Army, another point for every month you were overseas. You got so many points for each child that you had, and so many points for each medal. And on the first count, I only had 60 points, but a Goathead had like 85. And in 3 months, they had a recount, and then by that time, I had 66 points. And Goathead should have gone home. But they let the cook go home.
Why was that?
Well, they had the same amount of points,
Oh,
and they let the cook go home, because by that time, old Goathead was squad leader. They needed him.
needed him.
Yeah.
How did he get killed, Dad?
I talked to him that morning, and he was sicker than a devil. And I said, Goat, you should go on sick call. You're too damn sick to go out on patrol. And he said, I gotta do it. And got shot right here. And that day, his brother, who was in the Air Force, came to the company headquarters, to the kitchen, actually, and asked about his brother. He hadn't seen him for 2 years.
The day he was killed, his
Yep.
brother showed up?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what the different feeling or for World War II? Someone for Veterans Day yesterday was mentioning how impressed she was at these men their and women at the young ages they were, that just, joined up, they felt it was their duty, they just went without a thought.
Yeah.
And even, like, the group from Stoughton was kind of excited to get out of Stoughton.
Yeah.
It was kind of like going to camp.
Yeah. Well, we grew up during a depression, never had nothing,
Right.
and so we didn't expect anything, really. And we did what we were told, and we had a different attitude, I guess. It's the way it was. We didn't question very much.
But also, wouldn't you say, looking back on some other wars that we've had since World War II, I mean, World War II, our nation was threatened. It
Yeah.
was, you were really defending our country, because even people here in Stoughton were going up to the city clock tower and watching for German
Yeah.
planes
Right.
at night. I mean, people were very frightened of being invaded.
Everything was rationed here. And I remember when I got discharged, I had to go sign up for a ration book. And so my folks could buy more, whatever was allowed, meat, sugar and stuff like that.
Right.
See, I got out pretty early. I got out in November of 45 actually, yeah,
45.
yeah.
So it was a span of 2 years that you were,
2 years, 9 months and 8 days.
you remember exactly.
Yeah.
And did you get to go home because you had enough points then?
Yeah, I had enough points.
Okay.
But then I was home about, well, in January, my malaria came back on me. And I went to a local doctor, and he was an old Army doctor too, but he didn't realize I had malaria. See, we took pills every day, Atibrin pills, to lessen the effects of the malaria, so it didn't make us as sick as it normally would. But as soon as we quit taking the Adamant pills after we got home, and then the malaria came back because we had it in us all the time.
Right.
And
Was it Dr. Keenan that you went to see?
no, Dr. Smadow.
Dr. Smadow.
Just on my 22nd birthday, I was called to Madison for a physical. And I had a malaria attack right on the table when the doctor was checking me over.
Oh,
So when I got home, a friend of mine, Harlow Vindal, took me up. And when I got home, there was a telegram there to report back immediately, get ready to go to a hospital. So I got back up. There was some place on the corner of Park and University Avenue. And they gave me a ticket for a bus. And it was that fast bus that went to Milwaukee. So Harlow took me down to the bus terminal. I got on. I was sicker than a dog. And when they let me off the bus, I didn't know where it was. So I saw a taxi, and I asked him if he knew where the vet's hospital was. And he took me out there. I think it cost me about $3. And I walked in and to the you got it. Into the hospital, and the doctor examined me, and he said, "Good thing you came down here. You'd have been dead in 2 weeks."
oh my gosh.
So they put me in a ward, and the next morning I said, "Well, where's the mess hall?" The guy says, "Follow me." So we walked about, that was a huge hospital. Walked and walked and walked, and I was so weak I couldn't hardly get there. And then I knew what my diet was, low fat. So all I'd get was some eggs, scrambled eggs, but they weren't fried or anything, you know. They were, I don't know how they made them without frying them. They were so dry. So it was either those eggs or cottage cheese.
Yum.
For 2 months and 3 days, that's what I lived on.
Wow.
And the day they discharged me, the doctor said, "Oh boy," he said, "you look a lot better than when you did when you came in here." He said, "Jump on the scale. I want to see how much weight you've gained." I weighed exactly the same, right to the ounce. The day I checked in there, hadn't gained a pound. But as soon as I got home, then I put on the weight.
Was malaria pretty common to people who served in the Philippines?
Everybody had it.
'Cause of all the mosquitoes and,
Yeah.
yeah.
And most of them had hepatitis too. But it was the,
From the food.
yeah. Said it was a lack of the proper food.
Right, or proper food, or the handling of it, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the guys couldn't even get out of bed. They were so sick and weak.
So we're not talking about real healthy GIs over there fighting in the Philippines. We're talking about people that are dragging around very, very sick.
Yep.
It's amazing you could get done anything that you did.
Well, the Japanese were just as sick as we were.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Oh, yeah, we'd find evidence. Yeah. Of course, by that time, they didn't have medication or anything, you know. So they were better off giving up and getting put in a POW camp, and they took care of them.
Oh. Did you have soldiers surrendering to you then?
Oh, yeah. When I was Jeep driver, I came back with a load of we had to go and haul water from a water point. I just came in my garden. I just came into the company, and I saw a patrol going out. So I grabbed my gun off a Jeep and I went with them. And there was a guy walking behind a bunch, and he had a radio. He was talking back to the guys at the company headquarters. And so I caught up to him. His name was Jimmy Thompson. And all of a sudden he stopped and he laid the radio down. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "You see that pile of rocks over there?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, there's a Jap in there. I saw him move." So he showed me about where it was, and he said, "When I say something, you shoot." And so I was all ready, and all of a sudden this Jap soldier jumped out.
I surrender.
Surrendered. So Jimmy and I, we brought him back to the company, and they had Filipinos there who could talk Japanese, and they questioned him. And they said, "Oh, this guy he don't know nothing, you know, he's no help to us." So they said, "Thompson, you and Gjertson, take him out and shoot him." I said, "Not me." I said, "Thompson, you gonna shoot him?" He said, "Nope." So they let him go, but he wouldn't leave. So he sat there all night in the rain, and he was still there in the morning. And so they said, "Well, Gjertson, you'll have to take him down to battalion and to the prison camp." So we put him in the back of the Jeep, and then we tied his arms down to the side of the Jeep, and they gave me a guard, so I took off with him, and we were going by a bunch of Filipinos, and they start throwing stones at the Jap. So I cut the rope off his arms, and all the Filipinos ran away. So then he rode that way till we got down to battalion headquarters, and we turned him in, so. Yeah. So,
Amy, do you want to look at your list and see if there's anything that, I've just been kind of skipping around, if there's something that you wanted to. Oh, do you want us to go back over anything? So, is there anything else you want to talk about, Dad?
no, I guess not. Guess I jabbered enough.
It's really interesting. How many people do you run into? I know you go out to the VFW a lot. How many people do you run into that were in the Pacific area?
Well, there's
Is it
quite a
mostly-
few.
Quite a few, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, well, I saw one yesterday. I went in the Army with Bob Jacobson,
Right.
Bob Gregg, went in the same day, and there's quite a few other ones too. Bob Swartz, he went in the Navy. George Berry, who was 1 day older than me, he went to Europe. He never came back. And Chink Uslan, that you met yesterday, he went the same day. And the reason he didn't go with us, the sergeant had sent him out to wash the windows on the barracks we were in.
Yeah.
And they loaded us up in the truck and took us to the train, and Chink was outside washing windows. When he came in, he said, "Sergeant, where is everybody?" And the sergeant says, "Where you been?" Chink said, "You sent me out to wash windows." Well, he said, "That's okay. There'll be other guys leaving for some other place." So Chink ended up in Europe too.
Did he?
Yeah. And George Berry, they didn't have shoes to fit him. That's why we left him behind, and he went to Europe.
I just have one thing I remember. You said that when you were in the Philippines, I don't remember where you were at this time, but when Franklin Roosevelt died, and you heard about it, he was
Yeah.
the only president you'd known,
Yeah,
because he was president for 12 years, right?
it was really a shock.
Tell me about how shocked everyone was.
Oh, everybody just felt terrible. We thought, he was running the whole war. What's gonna happen now?
And he was pretty much running the
Yeah,
war.
Yeah.
Did you even know who the vice president was at the time?
No.
No? It wasn't a major concern,
I
was
wasn't
it?
voting then. But, oh yeah, we found out that they were gonna attack Japan. And what they had laid out for us was to go in by gliders.
Oh,
So we were scheduled to start glider training. We didn't think much of that, 'cause we had heard they didn't all land too good,
yeah.
So we were pretty worried about that when the war ended. So we were pretty happy that Truman took over and finished the war. So then we knew we were gonna go home. Yeah. So I know it says something about what my rank was, so I'll tell you about that too. My squad leader came over and said, would you like to be assistant squad leader? Would be a buck sergeant at 3 stripes, I said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So I got a letter from regimental headquarters that I had been promoted to sergeant. Then they found out that the company clerk, who was a corporal, they'd promised him that he would get the next sergeant opening. So in 3 days, they took 1 stripe away from me.
Aw.
They made him a sergeant. Didn't make any difference. I didn't get paid anyhow. But I've got two official notices. Once that I was appointed to sergeant, and then one I was appointed to corporal.
Corporal.
So I ended up being a corporal. And when I got back to my tent, my squad had sewn corporal stripes on everything, even my underwear. They must have really had fun. I don't know where they got them, but
Kind of rubbed it in.
yeah. And then when we got to California, we were in a camp, and I can't even remember the name of it, but there was German war prisoners there that were supposed to keep it was cold, and we were close to the mountains, and we could see the fires up in the mountains. This was in November. And I went to sleep one night, and a guy woke me up and said, are you going to Wisconsin? I said, yeah. Well, he says, your train is about ready to pull out. So I said, well, where is it? And he said, it's over that way. So I took off running with my duffel bag, and I found where they were loading up the train. And so I went down through and saw a car and got in it. And I said, is there any room in this car? The guy said, yeah. So I found a bunk. And the next morning, the train, the officer who was in charge of the train came through. I had my corporal stripes on. Nobody else had a stripe on. So he said, you're in charge of this car. You keep it clean and make sure that they pick up all the stuff, and say, okay. So later on, when the other guys got dressed, they were all master sergeants, tech sergeants, staff sergeants. I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna have to clean this car all by myself. But they did it. Yeah. I said, you guys, somebody's gotta clean that latrine, and pick up all the cigarette butts and stuff, and they did it.
They did it for
Yeah.
you? Cool. This was your trip home?
Yeah, they called it the Pine Tree Special with snowplow attached for Camp McCoy. Yeah. Another funny thing that happened was on one ship we were on, I had to work in the scullery. That's where you wash the dishes. And I had a crew, and they announced over the PA system that Corporal Gjertson, bring your crew down to the scullery. So then I had to run around the ship and find all these guys and get them down there to start washing dishes. And that was an awful job. The guys are seasick and they were throwing up all over. They just look at their food and they'd throw up.
Was this on the trip home or the trip over?
It was on the trip home, yeah. And I met a guy from Stoughton on the boat.
You did?
We stood, for 3 days, we stood looking at each other. He came over, he said, "You Duck Gjertson?" Yeah, it was Kelly Wright.
Oh, really?
But he was so thin, he was in the Air Force. And I don't think he weighed 180 pounds then. He's a big guy. So we came home in the same ship. I got to Camp McCoy, and I didn't know how I was going to get from Camp McCoy to Stoughton. And Kelly says, "My brother's coming up to pick me up. You want to ride to Stoughton?" I said, "Oh boy, do I ever." Yeah. So that's how things turn out sometimes. Then he stopped in Madison and he said, "If you guys," he said, "if you need a white shirt, you better buy it now in Madison, because I don't think there are any white shirts left in Stoughton." So yeah, I bought a white shirt and I bought a jacket, and they were loaded with money. And I forget what else I bought, a pair of shoes, I think, up on the square. And then he brought us down to Stoughton. Yeah. That was the good old days. It was in, yeah, November 16th, 1945. And it was cold. Boy, our blood was thin and we couldn't stand that weather. But we got used to it.
And what, I'm not very good on history. What day did the war actually end? You got home in,
Must have been in October. VJ Day, yeah. There wasn't as much excitement for VJ Day as there was victory in Europe.
right?
But when our ship came in, there was a band playing on the dock, and it was pretty nice. Mm.
At least you knew the country was behind you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Dad. We've been talking for about an hour, I think. And I think we'll just wind it up here,
Okay.
okay? We're done, Dennis. Yeah, you not only sneezed, but you. You must have banged the table, because I heard the sneeze and then